Formula One is a complex sport to say the least, where the slightest change to a car can mean valuable seconds on track. So getting into it as a newbie can be pretty daunting at times. So here at GPFans, we've produced a quick guide to let the F1 newbie know all the essentials that they need for this new season that has just started. I'm Ollie Wilson for GPFans, and here are 10 things you need to know from the F1's Guide for Dummies. Now, we're not going to use the word dummy in a derogatory term here to anybody that may not know the basics of Formula One. We all once relied on either our parents, a crazy uncle or auntie, or just the soothing words of Murray Walker and David Croft to get us into the sport and helpfully explain the mere basics of Formula One that has more complexities to it than, well, a very complex sport. But there are some F1 fans, as it grows in popularity, that may not know how qualifying works, how many races there are in a season, because you'll have to give up quite a few Sundays over the year to stay on top of every race, and why little men in boiler suits stand so close to the circuit waving yellow or red flags at cars travelling at around 200 miles per hour, rather them than me. So if you're a first timer to the sport or have been sucked in by the drama of Drive to Survive, here are 10 of the basics need to knows that will get you through your first season in Formula One. And if you're already an expert or you just want to inform others that the FIA's job is to help Max Verstappen win, feel free to let us know in the comments section below. Number 1, how many races are in a season? Okay, let's start with a very simple question to kick things off. How much time is a Formula One fan going to have to invest in following the sport? It's always useful to know before getting hooked on a potential new passion how much of your life it's going to take up and how much bargaining you're going to have to do to ensure that you have the prime spot on the sofa for every race of the season. And the negotiating used to be a lot easier too, when a Formula One season would last around 16 races or so. However, thanks to the increased popularity of the sport and the added desire and status that hosting a Grand Prix provides to cities and countries, more and more races have been added over the years to bring us what is meant to be a 23 race calendar for this 2023 season. Now, this year we will only be having 22 races due to the cancellation of the Chinese Grand Prix, but the sport's governing body, the FIA, wants to have a full calendar eventually. There can be a maximum of 24 Grand Prix in a season under an agreement signed between the teams, Formula One and the FIA. How many teams are on the grid? Another nice and simple one. At the moment, there are 10 teams with 2 drivers for each team on track. Unlike in other motorsports, like perhaps NASCAR, the 2 cars for each team are almost identical in looks, or their livery, aside from the number on the vehicle and maybe a couple of bright accents on the numbers, or even the camera on top of the car to indicate which of the 2 drivers is behind the wheel. The current teams in F1 are Red Bull Racing, Mercedes, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Alpine, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, McLaren, Haas and Williams. However, more teams are set to be joining the sport in 2026 when a new set of engine rules and regulations comes into play, so keep your eye out for a few new additions in the next few years. How long is an F1 race? A simple question with a slightly complicated answer. An F1 race is designed to last around 90 minutes or so, with some a little shorter and some a little longer than others. The minimum race distance for a Grand Prix is 190 miles or 305 kilometers, with the circuit in Monaco the only exception to the rule, which runs for 160 miles. Now, tracks have different lengths, so for example, a lap at the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa is around 7 kilometers, with that Grand Prix then lasting just 44 laps. However, the British Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone is 5.9 kilometers in length per lap, so the Grand Prix runs for 52 laps. However, things can change somewhat when bad weather hits a circuit or there are multiple large crashes on track. That means the race needs to be paused for safety reasons. So a race must be completed within a 2-hour window, although the race stewards, those in charge of the race, can extend that to 3 hours within their discretion. What are the other days of a race weekend for, aside from the race on Sunday? So you fought for your 23 Sundays in front of the telly for around 3 hours at a time, because obviously you need to see the race build-up and the post-race celebrations along with the actual Grand Prix. But that's not all the racing action that Formula 1 has on offer over the weekend. The racing weekend actually starts on Friday on track, with a couple of practice sessions for the teams at an hour each. These are useful for the constructors to prepare the car's setup for the rest of the weekend. However, the timings are usually slower than we'll see on a Saturday or a Sunday, and the leaderboard doesn't mean too much to the casual viewer. Saturday, however, things ramp up. That day starts with another practice session of an hour before qualifying begins, and that is when the competition really gets going. Qualifying sets the starting order for the race on Sunday, so teams are trying to get the maximum out of the car on their flying laps. Now, there is actually a curveball to all of this, and that is the sprint race weekend. We've produced a guide already in the past to the sprint race format, and you can find that in the description down below. But basically, on these 6 weekends of the season, Saturday qualifying is moved to Friday, with Saturday hosting a shorter version of the Grand Prix that gives the top 8 drivers a handful of points, and the result of Saturday's race sets the grid for Sunday. Don't worry about it too much, we will cover it later on. How does qualifying work? Well, whether it's a sprint weekend or a regular Grand Prix weekend, the format for qualifying pretty much stays the same. The session is split into 3 parts: Q1, Q2, and Q3. Q1 is an 18-minute long session and sees all of the cars out on track, each trying to find the fastest single lap pace they can manage. Once the 18 minutes are up, the slowest 5 drivers of that 1 lap pace will drop out of the session and will start in the order they finished in the timing charts. Q2 sees the top 15 cars going back out on track and fighting for 15 minutes to finish in the top 10 of the session once the clock runs out. The slowest 5 drivers are again knocked out and will start in the positions they finished in. Then the top 10 drivers go through to the final session, which is Q3, a 12-minute shootout of the fastest cars trying to put the quickest lap time down possible in order to see who starts the race on pole position and the order of the top 10. Exciting stuff indeed. Street circuits or race circuits. Grand Prix have been held on more traditional racetracks for the majority of Formula 1's storied history. Purpose-built circuits like Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, Interlagos for the Brazilian Grand Prix, and Monza for the Italian Grand Prix have been the bedrock of the sport's foundation and provided plenty of iconic moments that have thrilled the packed grandstands. However, in the last few years, Formula 1 has seen a growing trend of the street circuit, where the F1 track is built into the city streets of the host venue, providing a very different and difficult challenge. Monaco is perhaps the most well-known of these venues. The jewel in the Formula 1 crown, as it's called, is perhaps the most prestigious race venue to win on the calendar, with those close barriers and tight streets providing a test for drivers that isn't just about overtaking, but more about concentration and staying vigilant for the 90 minutes on track, with zero margin for error. The stunning setting and luxury lifestyle that comes with the Principality only adds to the glamour of the event as a result, and many new street circuits have hit the calendar in an attempt to almost steal Monaco's thunder. Las Vegas, for instance, is new to the 2023 calendar and is desperately trying to be the new Monaco, as it tries to attract the multi-millionaire celebrities along with the casual F1 fan, while the tight Saudi Arabian street circuit of Jeddah that came to the calendar in 2021 has the close feel and harrowing danger of Monaco's tight track, where a small error is punished emphatically. Some feel Monaco is the iconic street circuit, others feel these new circuits can steal its crown, and others like seeing racing on those traditional track setups, with gravel traps and purpose-built facilities for racing, unlike the temporary street setup. There's pretty much something for everyone in Formula 1, depending on what you like. What are the 2 trophies being fought for? There are two championships fought for in Formula 1, the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Championship. Now, the Drivers' Championship is for the individual driver who gets the most points on track in the season, more on that later, while the Constructors is for the team with the most points accumulated by both of their drivers. The Drivers' Championship is perhaps considered a more prestigious accolade to win, and will gain the most attention from viewers and media outlets. However, the Constructors' title is the title that the teams want the most, as it means a lot more money for the team who finishes above their rivals. How does a driver win the championship? To become the Drivers' Champion, just get more points than everybody else. Over the 23 races, a maximum of 646 points can be scored. A driver receives 25 points for a race win, and an additional point goes to the driver who sets the fastest lap of the race. So the race winner can come away with 598 points if they win every single race and take every single fastest lap point of the season. Add to that the additional 8 points for every single sprint race that you find victory in, and we get the grand total. Max Verstappen won the 2022 Drivers' World Championship with a record 454 points. Of course, there aren't only points for the race victor on a Sunday or in a sprint race. Second on the Sunday receives 18 points, 15 for third, fourth gets you 10 points, and then down 8, 6, 4, 2, and 1 from 5th to 10th respectively. The top 8 in a sprint race all get points. First, as I said earlier, gets 8, descending down to 8th place, picking up just the 1 point. Which are the best Grand Prix to watch? Well, that's all very much based on personal preference. Monaco, as I've touched on, is filled with twists and turns, and an incident can occur at any moment, especially if it's damp. However, it doesn't provide much overtaking with its tight layout, making driving side by side and wheel to wheel near impossible around it. Brazil in 2022 had more overtakes in the race than anywhere else, with 62 passes on track, and is another venue where the elements can really come into play, with rain potentially a factor on the weekend, which always adds a little more spice. The United States Grand Prix in Austin, the Bahrain Grand Prix and Abu Dhabi Grand Prix at the end of the season, and the Austrian as well, all had plenty of overtaking manoeuvres on track in 2022. However, some fans enjoy the street circuits of Baku and Saudi Arabia, while others prefer the long, drawn-out laps of Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium or the fast corners of Silverstone. Again, it all comes down to personal preference and the sort of atmosphere and racing you enjoy watching. So how does somebody become an F1 driver? Buy a go-kart and start early, like really early. Like all professional sports, it's not easy to just walk into an F1 car. Most of the drivers on the grid began in their youth racing go-karts before moving up to the next level of racing in single-seater cars. Many now were part of teams' young driver programs that hunt for the best young talent around the karting tracks and then promote them through the ranks. Many of the drivers on the grid today, for example, have come through these schemes that are run by the likes of Red Bull Racing, Mercedes, and Ferrari. Without the help of a team, drivers have to search for sponsors and funding to get them moving through the ranks themselves, having to perhaps buy a seat with a team and then working through Formula 3, Formula 2 to eventually get to Formula 1. It's a very long, hard graft to get one of the 20 seats in Formula 1, although every single team needs reserve drivers and simulator drivers to help with car development, test runs and practice sessions. There are a few extra spots available for the lucky few. So that's your dummies guide to the 10 things you should probably know about Formula 1. Let us know what we've missed off in the comments section below. GPFans.com as always for the latest news in Formula 1, and of course hit subscribe to stick with us here at the YouTube channel.